Hey there. I think I want some bread today. And, on keto, we don't really do bread. So I looked up a recipe for another bread, not my 90-second keto bread with almond flour. I found another recipe using flaxseed. So let me show you the ingredients. I'm going to need, I think, I think 2 cups of the flaxseed maybe. 5 eggs, some avocado oil, some Himalayan pink salt. I'm using garlic powder. The recipe called for oregano, but I'm using garlic powder and also some baking powder. And the eggs you're supposed to mix together like in a blender along with the oil and then add those two to your dry mix and bake it in the oven. So let's make this bread. Again, it's my very first time making this flaxseed bread, which is keto friendly. I found the recipe on lowcarbspark.com. So let me give you all of the ingredients first. 2 cups of flaxseed meal. So I bought a bag of this today. Actually, I got this from Aldi's for it was less than $2. So I need 2 cups of this. It calls for 5 large eggs, and they ask that the eggs be at room temperature. So because I've had these out for hours, that's why I'm going to be making bread now. It calls for 1/3 cup of avocado oil. It calls for a tablespoon of dried oregano. I'm not going to use dried oregano. I'm actually going to use some garlic powder instead. And I'm going to probably put some everything but the bagel seasoning in my bread also. It calls for 1/2 cup of water. It calls for a teaspoon. It calls for a teaspoon of pink salt. It also calls for a tablespoon of baking powder. You need to line a 13x9 pan with parchment paper. I pulled a little loaf pan out and I got parchment paper here. So it calls for you to line your pan with that. You need to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Line the baking pan with the parchment paper. First, I'm going to mix all my dry ingredients together. Set that aside, and then in a blender, I blend together the 5 eggs along with my 1/3 cup of avocado oil. So you're blending your 5 eggs and a 1/3 cup of avocado oil together in a blender. After you've blended all that for about 30 seconds or so until it's nice and frothy, you then mix the egg mixture with the dry ingredients with a spatula. Then you add the water, mix all that up together, let that sit for about 5 minutes, and then you bake the bread for about 20 minutes. After the bread is nice and firm, you let it cool, and then you cut the bread into 10 slices and enjoy. So again, we're preheating our oven to 350 degrees. Then we're baking the bread for 20 minutes or until the top is firm and golden. After my bread is done, I think I'm going to take some butter and put some butter across the top of it. We'll see. The recipe says that you can keep the bread in the refrigerator for up to 4 days, and also that the recipe is freezer friendly and it's great when toasted in some coconut oil or butter. So that's the recipe. Let me get busy baking and I'll show you what it looks like. I wanted to show you what the flaxseed looks like. Cornmeal or flour. So here's my first cup. And let me get my second cup in here and finish mixing together all of the dry ingredients. 2 cups of flaxseed, a teaspoon of sea salt, and a tablespoon of baking powder, and my tablespoon or so of garlic powder. All right, I've got 5 eggs and a 1/3 cup of avocado oil here that I'm about to mix together. Okay, I am going to assume that this is frothy and I can now mix it together. This is indeed frothy, so I will pour it in to the dry mix. We'll use this to get the extra out. Make sure we get all of our eggs added in as much as possible anyway. And then it tells us to pour in a 1/2 cup of water. There we go. And from there, we are just mixing it all up together. And after mixing it though, it tells us to let it sit for 5 minutes. So we'll mix and we'll let it sit for 5 minutes as instructed. Then we'll be pouring it into the pan here. So it ends up being a pretty thick mix. So I can imagine with it baking up being a nice bread-like texture. And again, with 5 eggs, we're going to see what we get. Yeah, if you can see the consistency with stirring. And I'm assuming with letting it sit, it's probably going to get a little bit thicker. But I think I have it mixed up pretty well, so now we'll let it sit for 5 minutes. Oh, it definitely got thicker. You see, it doesn't move much, so we'll put it in, and it is supposed to bake for 20 minutes or until the top is firm and golden. So 20 minutes, we'll see what it looks like. Okay, this is after 20 minutes and it looks pretty good. I put in some shredded cheese before I put it in the oven, and I also added some everything but the bagel seasoning on top. So we need to let it cool, then slice it into 10 slices. But it looks pretty good. Flaxseed bread. All right, the loaf of bread is cooling. Hopefully we'll have good success. I have to try it out tomorrow. It's bedtime now, but it looks great. Good morning. Let's check out the bread from last night. I left it out last night. Oh, still nice firm. Let's slice it up and see what we got. We're supposed to get 10 slices out of here, and then each slice ends up being only 1 net carb. I cut the whole loaf up. I actually managed to get 11 slices out. And check it out. All right, now I've got the bread all packaged in a baggie because the recipe said that we could store it for up to 4 days in the refrigerator. And they also said that it freezes well, so I'll probably end up freezing most of it because I'm not a big bread eater at all. So I would not be eating this amount of bread in 4 days' time. I do have a couple pieces to go with me to work for lunch, though, to eat with my leftover bacon cheeseburger.